Hello and welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and this is my video for Star Trek Enterprise, my 20 favorite episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. This is a companion video to one I did last week, which was my 10 least favorite Star Trek Enterprise episodes. So I just recently completed my rewatch of that entire series, so I'm here to report on what my least favorite, which I did last week, and my favorite episodes are this week. And I've done this before for all the previous Trek series, TOS, TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. So you should subscribe to my channel if you have not already and check out all of those videos that I've done in the past. Now, as for Enterprise, so I did pick my 20 favorite, although I will say toward the bottom end of the list, like 17, 18, 19, 20, decent episodes, not the greatest as far as the overall Star Trek franchise goes, but as we move up the list, it gets better and better. Love my top 10, love my top 5. And I have to also tell you that Season 3 dominates this list, because I just think Season 3 is easily the best season of Enterprise. Seasons 1 and 2 were pretty bad, as reflected in my 10 least favorite episode video that I did last week. Dominated by seasons 1 and 2. This one is dominated by season 3. In fact, season 3 has half of my top 20. 10 episodes in my top 20. 50% is season 3, including 7 out of the top 10, and the entirety of the top 6. So after I'm done with number 7, then that's it for non-season 3 episodes. This is just how highly I think of season 3 as compared to the other seasons of Enterprise. However, all 4 seasons are represented in this top 20, and in fact, all 4 seasons are actually represented in my top 10, with the seasons 1, 2, and 4 each getting 1 episode in the top 10, and season 3 dominating the rest. Before I dive into it, one more quick note. I'm doing the standard way that I handle 2-parters or 3-parters if they have the same title. So Shockwave parts 1 and 2, Stormfront parts 1 and 2, In the Mirror Darkly parts 1 and 2. Same title, parts 1 and 2, I count it as one entity. However, if it is one continuing story throughout 3 episodes, which is season 4, love to do that a lot, and season 3 has episodes like that, I count those as individual episodes. Separate titles, separate episodes. Same title, 1 episode. Got it? Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into it. I will do 20 through 11 fairly quickly, and then I will really bog down and spend some time with the top 10, and then I'll introduce them with my fancy little cartoon numbers where I do the funny voices and things like that. If you've seen my channel before, you know what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and start with my 20 through 11 of my favorite episodes of Enterprise. Okay, let's get things kicked off with my number 20, which is Future Tense from Season 2. So I used to think this episode was pretty mediocre, although upon my rewatch I definitely think I like it a little more. I kind of love the time loop scenes between Reed and Tucker, and overall there's a lot of pretty cool timey-wimey, time-travel-y type stuff in this episode. I think my big beef with it was that they never follow up on this. There's a lot of hanging threads coming out of this episode, but it's not really the fault of this episode itself. This episode is a good time and fun to watch, and it is number 20 on my list. Now moving on to number 19 on my list, which is also from Season 2, and that is The Expanse, not the television show, but the Season 2 finale for Star Trek Enterprise. Now, this is the introduction to the Xindi story arc that would dominate Season 3, and I think it's a really good introduction to that story. It sets the stakes high immediately. It kind of introduces us to the situation, and I think this is a sneaky good character episode for T'Pol, who has to make this big decision on whether to listen to her Vulcan superiors or go off with Archer to help save Earth. So I really enjoyed this episode, and it's number 19 on my list. At number 18 is Shockwave, Parts 1 and 2. This is the Season 1 finale and the Season 2 premiere. I always enjoy these episodes. I love the Daniels scenes in these episodes. They're not perfect. There's definitely some time travel logic issues, and I would say Part 2 is probably a little weaker than Part 1, although I will always have fun with the Archer scene where he comes out of the future guy portal thing and says, "I said you're an ugly bastard." I mean, how could you not have fun with that? So Shockwave Parts 1 and 2 is number 18 on my list. Moving on now to number 17 on my list is The Forgotten. So this is the first of many Season 3 Xindi story arc episodes that will be in this top 20. So this one is aptly named because I often forget about it. It is often the forgotten episode, but it is a sneaky good episode. This is the first one where Degra really commits to Archer. He attacks the reptilians at the end. I thought it was a really intense excitement and a sneaky good character episode for Tucker, who I don't always love as a character, but I did like his arc in this episode. So yeah, Forgotten is number 17 on my list. Now, moving on to number 16 on my list. This is from Season 2. This is Ceasefire. So, a lot of people make a big deal out of the Andorian incident from Season 1. I think that's a bit of an overrated episode. Give me Ceasefire over that one any day of the week. This was a really exciting episode, and this is when we're really starting to get to know Shran as a character, and you know I love me some Jeffrey Combs, and it really introduced the complexities between the Vulcans and the Andorians a little bit more than even that Andorian incident episode did do. So Ceasefire comes in at number 16 on my 20 favorite episode list. Moving on to number 15, KIR'SHARA from Season 4. And you've been wondering where my Season 4 episodes are. Fear not, we're starting a little run of Season 4 episodes between numbers 15 and 12. So KIR'SHARA is the third and final part of that Vulcan trilogy. And it's the only one I put on this list. I think it's a good wrap-up of that trilogy. I love how it connects the dots between the original series and Enterprise in a very nice way, while simultaneously erasing a bad mistake that I think the show made through the first two seasons, which was having the Vulcans be complete dickheads all the time. Now finally we can move on to the Vulcans being more like the Vulcans we know and love in TOS. Now, the reason why this is the only one in my top 20 and it's only at number 15 is maybe I don't love these as much as a lot of other people do, primarily because I think the villain is cartoonish and I cannot buy that he's a Vulcan. He's not even pretending to be logical, and that bothers me a little bit, but I still love this episode and it comes in at number 15. At number 14, staying within Season 4, The Observer Effect. So this is a rare Season 4 episode that is a standalone episode, not a part of a duology or a trilogy, and I think it works really well. I was a little unsure of it at first until I realized that these are the Organians. I think it's a very interesting take on the Organians, and it's a really kind of intense episode where these aliens are having to make this really tough Prime Directive-like decision, and I kind of love how the focus shifted to these aliens, the Organians, and yet they are inhabiting the bodies of familiar characters, which makes them relatable. So I thought this was actually quite brilliant. Moving on to number 13, Babel 1. This is the first part of that Andorian trilogy, and I know I'm probably the only one in the Star Trek universe who feels this way, but I actually have that Andorian trilogy a little higher ranked for me than the Vulcan trilogy, because while the villains are cartoonish, they're Romulans. They're supposed to be like that. They're not some Vulcan who is not the least bit logical, so I have no problem with the villains here. And what I love about these episodes is they set up the dawn of the Federation. And this is the first one where we get the mystery of what's really happening with the Tellurites and the Andorians. And just a lot of callbacks to one of my favorite original series episodes, Journey to Babel, the way that the Andorians and Tellurites are bickering amongst each other. So I really quite enjoyed this one. Number 12, United, which is the next episode in that Andorian trilogy. This episode is the true Dawn of the Federation episode. It's the one where Archer makes like this little speech like, hey, we thought we were out here to explore, but really, we gotta make some friends here. We've gotta make alliances. That's what this is really all about. Is uniting with other alien cultures, and he dedicates everything to make that happen, and I really love that. And of course we get the Shran scenes that are really great, where Shran is wanting to challenge that Tellurite dude to the death, and Archer kind of pulls one over on him by saying, no, you're gonna fight me instead, and great scenes there. So I love this episode, and it's number 12 on my list. At number 11, Stratagem, now breaking up that run of Season 4 episodes with yet another Xindi arc episode from Season 3. This is the one where I thought the Xindi arc started getting good. Prior to this, it was kind of okay. I felt like they were still trying to find their footing with this story, but the story really picks up the pace here. This is the one where Archer kidnaps Degra and puts on this little simulation where he tries to pretend that they have been in prison together for 3 years, and he's trying to get information out of them, and it's quite clever. Archer is actually quite clever in this whole episode. I love how he pulls one over on Degra at the end and gets the information that he needs. So great episode, and it is number 11 on my list. And now we can get into the top 10. Number 10. Kicking us off in the top 10 at number 10, Regeneration from Season 2. This episode lives by the motto, make the Borg creepy again, because the Borg were creepy as fuck when they were first introduced way back in the second season of The Next Generation in Q-Who. They were unstoppable, you couldn't negotiate with them, and they were just flat out terrifying. And then Best of Both Worlds came along and introduced yet another layer of creepiness into them by making them basically these zombies who turn humans into zombies, and they were still unstoppable and they were creepy as fuck. And then comes along First Contact, which I'm sorry, First Contact fans, but that film sucked. And this is where the Borg jumped the shark by introducing the Borg Queen, who is not at all terrifying, but rather quite silly and cartoonish. And then Voyager goes and just goes all in on the silliness and ridiculousness, and the Borg are far removed from the creepy villains they once were. But then Star Trek Enterprise comes along and brings the Borg back around full circle and makes them creepy again, because now we are seeing them through the eyes of a crew who has no idea who the Borg are, knows nothing about them, knows no way to stop them, and they have even less technology than the crews we would know later on in the 23rd and 24th centuries. So they're really, really creepy in this episode, and I love it. And I remember when it first came out, this episode, I was like, how are they going to have the Borg on Enterprise? That doesn't make any sense. but they made it work by connecting it to First Contact and saying that these were the Borg that had traveled back in time. So I guess technically what we're watching here is an alternate timeline that was created after the film First Contact. Try not to think about that too much. However, unfortunately, this episode does have one cringy line at the end that still bothers me, where Archer says something along the lines of, "Oh, what is that, like the 24th century?" We already have an explanation as to how the Borg knew about the human race. It's because Q flung the Enterprise into Borg space. This is over-explaining something that did not need another explanation to. It's prequelitis at its worst. However, it does not detract from the fact that this still is a top 10 Enterprise episode for me.
Number 9. Number 9. Number 9.
At number 9, 0 Hour, the season 3 finale, and really the final part of the 3-part finale. But as I said in my intro, different titles mean I count them separately. So each episode does count separately in this list, and you will find the other 2 coming up later. Now, absolutely love this episode, but as you have noticed, probably it is the lowest ranked of the 3, and that is because it doesn't really have a true ending, because they have to set up for that season 4 nonsense. And this scene that you are seeing on your screen with Archer running out of the explosion, I always found to be a bit cheesy, but everything that happens before that was thrilling, exciting, amazing, and a wonderful wrap-up to that 3-part finale, as you get the Aquatics now coming in to join Archer, and you're getting that final showdown with the Reptilians, who honestly I thought were great villains. So 0 Hour, although not as highly ranked as the other 2 parts of this 3-part finale of season 3, still makes my top 10. Still a great episode of Star Trek Enterprise.
2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? 8!
At number 8, Dear Doctor, from season 1, easily the best episode of the first season, as it puts aside all the sensationalism and over-sexualization and ripping off of previous episodes to actually tell a compelling story. It has really interesting and complex writing in this episode. So Archer and Phlox are given a complex dilemma with no black and white solutions, where there are these 2 species who share the same planet, and they are interdependent on each other, except one of them, the Valaxians, kind of dominates the other one, the Mink, and the Mink are unable to thrive because of the Valaxians. But the Valaxians have contracted a virus that is possibly going to wipe out their species, but the Mink would not be affected by this virus. So Phlox comes up with a cure, but he decides he doesn't want to give it to them. And while Archer rejects this at first, he does come to agree with Phlox, and the key line is here, I can't play God. And that is absolutely right, because this is a very complex issue and you do not actually know what would happen either way. If Phlox gives them the cure, maybe they end up wiping out the Mink. If he doesn't give them the cure, maybe they find it on their own. Maybe the Mink help them find it. Maybe they learn to work together and thrive together as 2 species. Or maybe they die out and the Mink really thrive and become one of the greatest species in the Federation. We don't know what was going to happen. It drives me crazy when people accuse Archer and Phlox of committing genocide, because that is an oversimplification of this episode and not giving it due for all the complexities of the issue. We don't really know what would happen. I wish a Modern Trek episode would follow up on this, because I would love to see what became of this. But because of the complex issues that this episode presents, I love it. However, like Regeneration, it does contain one cringy line where Archer says the thing about, "One day we'll have some kind of directive." I don't know why I just made Archer talk like Captain Kirk, but that's a silly line, and I wish they didn't have it in there. But other than that, absolutely love this episode, and it's number 8 in my top 20 favorite episodes of Enterprise. And you're climbing to number 7. At number 7, in A Mirror Darkly, parts 1 and 2 from season 4. When I did my 10 best parallel universe episodes, I accidentally called this In the Mirror Darkly. That was incorrect. This is In A Mirror Darkly, parts 1 and 2. Now, these episodes are basically fan service, the episodes, and I fucking love it. I don't agree with the people who just poo-poo all fan service and think that if it is calling back something previously, then it's just bad. I'm looking at you, Steve Shives. I disagree with that opinion. I love these episodes. I have so much fun. They just go all in on the nostalgia, and it works because it actually has a story with good characters in it as well, and is not just simply there to show us the nostalgia. But the nostalgia is fun as we get to see the old sets with the Defiant now coming back from the episode of Tholian Web, because we never found out what happened to it. We get to see the old uniforms. We get to see a new reborn Gorn, which frankly, even though the CGI back then wasn't very good, I kind of wish Strange New Worlds had kind of stuck in that realm of things rather than turning him into the creatures from the movie Alien and Aliens. But whatever, that's a sidetrack. But most of all, I love the premise of this episode of setting it entirely in the mirror universe without having to have our characters travel into it. That would have been hard to explain. I mean, Discovery kind of did retcon the fact that somebody had visited the mirror universe before Kirk did, but I think they were able to explain that pretty nicely. I think they would have had a much harder time doing that for the 22nd century crew. So I loved that they just went ahead, just like, let's just have these episodes completely in the mirror universe. Let's have a theme song that doesn't suck for a couple weeks. That was pretty cool. So In A Mirror Darkly, always will love these episodes, and they come in at number 7 on my favorite episode list. Get your KIR'SHARA on number 6. Yeah. At number 6, a Twilight from season 3. And from this point onward, I will no longer bother saying that the episode is from season 3, because you should now know that everything from here on out on this list is from season 3. Now, Twilight is actually the first really good episode that comes up in season 3 when you're watching it in chronological order. The first part of the season is from bad to mediocre. They're still kind of finding their footing, and this episode is really great. I will say though, when I first saw it, I didn't love it as much. It's something that's kind of grown on me after multiple viewings. I thought at first it was kind of, okay, we're just doing the alternate timeline thing again, that's cool. But I was really annoyed by how moronic Captain Tucker is at the end. I mean, he's a complete idiot, and he's only an idiot so that the story can happen. So it's a very clear plot contrivance, and that really, really bothered me. However, after multiple viewings, I am able to overlook that a little bit. I mean, it still bugs me, but it doesn't ruin the episode for me, because now I'm just really keyed in on the relationship between Archer and T'Pol, and I think this is the best Archer and T'Pol episode well, maybe second best to one that's coming up later, but just as far as their relationship, and it's not necessarily implicitly stated that there's anything romantic going on, so this is a far cry from that awful night in sick bay, which if you want to hear about that, go watch my least favorite episode list. But anyway, what really does it for me with this episode is how creative and outside of the box this episode is. There's no actual time travel that takes place in this episode, and yet it is an alternate timeline episode. I mean, at least not time travel with people. There are parasites that kind of do a sort of time travel, and I thought that was such a brilliant resolution to this episode, and I just really love it. I love it. So it is number 6 on my list of my 10 favorite Star Trek Enterprise episodes.
Number 5 is Alive.
At number 5, Simultude. So this is one of 2 episodes in my top 5 where Star Trek Enterprise goes full BSG, even though this was before BSG was actually on the air. But what I mean by that is that the human race is at the verge of extinction, and the captain has to make some really tough decisions, and this was a particularly tough one for Archer to make, and it was a very compelling episode because of that. But what I remember this episode as most of all is Tuvix done correctly. Tuvix, of course, being the episode from Star Trek Voyager that you can find on my least favorite Star Trek Voyager episode list, as well as my most overrated episodes in Star Trek list. Tuvix was trying to present this moral dilemma, but it failed. Couple things that this episode does better than Tuvix. First of all, Sim is actually an independent entity. He's a clone of Trip, but he's an independent entity, whereas Tuvix would not exist without 2 other people combining to form him. My brother had often used the analogy of the original series episode Enemy Within. No one was saying that it was wrong to put the 2 Kirks back together, that it was immoral, because it doesn't really make any sense. But most of all, for me, Sim is a sympathetic character, and he actually hesitates to run away because he was about to do that. He was like, I gotta get out of here, and he was like, you know what, I care about this crew, I care about this ship because I'm a clone of Tucker, and yes, that makes total sense. That's exactly how he would behave, whereas Tuvix is a flaming narcissist who does not give a fuck about the Voyager crew, and that is why Tuvix fails where Simultude succeeds. Now, I don't want to just compare it to Tuvix because it does stand on its own as a really strong moral dilemma and a really strong season of television, and that is why Simultude is number 5 on my favorite episode list.
Now this is the Fantastic Four.
At number 4, Azati Prime. So this is the episode that many previous episodes were building to. We've got to get to Azati Prime. We've got to get the weapon. And this episode did not at all disappoint. But not only was it one that previous episodes had built up to, but it is an episode that future episodes build off of. So it is a very key episode in that season 3 Xindi story arc, and it is filled with excitement, and most of all, it's that point in our hero's journey where it doesn't look like the heroes can win. I mean, Archer has been captured by the reptilians. You don't know how he's going to get out of it. The Enterprise is seriously getting its ass kicked. Like, how are they getting out of this? This made for really great TV. And the fact that they were even able to do better things after it is just phenomenal. So a truly great episode, a crucial episode in that 3rd season Xindi story arc of Star Trek Enterprise.
Uno, dos, tres! Tres! Number 3.
At number 3, Countdown. So I should say that my top 3 are basically interchangeable. I mean, there are small degrees of separation between the three of them, and given that, I guess I will put Countdown in at number 3, but it's almost like a three-way tie for first place. Countdown, of course, is that middle part of the final trilogy of the 3rd season, and it's kind of the heart of that trilogy, the beef of that story. We've got all kinds of exciting things happening. We have Hoshi kidnapped by the reptilians who are trying to brainwash her into giving them the information that they need, and she's very resistant, and that was really good. And I absolutely love the scene with Archer and the aquatics. The aquatics I found to be really fascinating, even though by today's standards the CGI is not spectacular. I still find them to be a really interesting race, and the fact that they were Switzerland and Archer had to convince them to go to his side, that was really good stuff. And this is the episode kind of like AZATI Prime, where our heroes are kind of down and out, and it looks like they don't have a good chance to win. And then, of course, they come back in the next episode, 0 Hour, and pull it out. But really, really compelling television and really good stuff. And Countdown is number 3 on my countdown.
2 of Hearts, number 2.
At number 2, Damage, or as I like to call it, what Voyager should have been. Voyager did do something like this with the Year of Hell, but it was just an alternate timeline that gets undone at the end of it, whereas Damage was the direct result of the previous episode, AZATI Prime, where the Enterprise had just got its ass kicked, and Archer has got his ass beaten down by the reptilians, and the ship is at an all-time low. And this carries forward after this episode too. The Enterprise just doesn't get magically repaired, and that's why I love season 3 so much, because there are consequences. Now this is that second episode that I was talking about when I mentioned Simultude, that there were these 2 episodes in my top 5 where there was a really tough moral decision that the captain had to make, with the human race being on the brink of extinction, and Archer has to totally fuck over these totally innocent aliens and leave them stranded in the middle of space because he's desperate to save the human race. And the scene between Archer and T'Pol, now this is the best Archer and T'Pol scene in all of Star Trek Enterprise, and that scene is so good, so well acted, and it's one of those scenes where you can see both points of view. It reminds me a lot of the scene between Chakotay and Janeway in the Scorpion episodes. I would say this is probably a close second to that as far as a first officer captain confrontation scene. So good. This is so good. Such a good episode. I wish more of Star Trek was like this. So Damage is number 2, basically part of the 3-way tie for first place on my favorite Enterprise episode list. Ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary individuals, number 1! And my number 1 favorite Star Trek Enterprise episode is The Council, which is the first part of that 3-part finale for the 3rd season. I love this one so much because this is another one like AZATI Prime that we have been building toward for a little while, and it is a really great payoff. We finally get to see Archer standing in front of that council, and this is where we get that political intrigue in Star Trek that I so freaking love so much. And the best part to me, while also being the most heartbreaking and gut-wrenching part, is the surprise death of Degra at the end of this episode, killed by the lead reptilian dude. And Degra was a character that they had so well developed over the course of the season. By this point, we are very much invested in that character. We very much feel for him, and to see him just murdered in cold blood like that was rather shocking, but very effective, made for a very effective ending of this episode, which of course sets up for Countdown, which sets up for 0 Hour, but this is the episode that got the ball rolling on that 3-part finale, and I have to say, just by a small margin, it is slightly my favorite of that 3-parter, and therefore my favorite of the entire series of Star Trek Enterprise. So the Council is my #1 favorite episode. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching my 20 favorite Enterprise episode list. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have not already, please go and check out my 10 least favorite Enterprise episode video, as well as all my favorite and least favorite for all the other Trek shows. Please subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.